Hey guys, I had the pleasure of speaking with Ellen Messer today. She's the CEO and founder of TechTalk Marketing, which focuses on startups and consulting firms who have technology products and engineering services. Side note, she's done some work for me, and I personally highly recommend her. You should check her out. In this episode, we talk about what's changed and what hasn't in these AI marketing times, how she got through the tough times in her career. There's one time she was working so many hours, she was falling asleep at stoplights. We talk about that. We then go on and also talk about the biggest marketing mistakes that she's seen after her 20 plus years of experience. Hope you guys enjoy. This is episode 13 of How Not to Build. The first question is the most important question.
Okay.
What are you glad about?
I'm glad about the direction my business is taking right now. I'm glad about life. Things are going well. My daughter just got married, so life is good.
Congratulations. Your daughter, how many kids do you have? Three.
She's the oldest.
The oldest, okay. So are they all married yet or just the one?
No, just the one.
Okay, all right.
First one, so yeah, just very exciting. How about you? What are you glad about?
What am I glad about? No one has ever asked me that.
Oh, I forgot. I'm used to being interactive, so I'm used to asking questions back.
No. This is great. We're gonna do this however we want to do it. What am I glad about? I'm actually very glad that Qatar is sitting behind the camera. It's hard in a tech business to involve your family. And that's been one of the things I've always wanted to do, is involve my kids in the stuff that I do. So, they have to get to a certain age before I can teach them how to code. But to learn how to operate a video camera and do some basic editing, they can actually do that.
Yeah.
So,
that's great.
So I'm actually excited that she has the opportunity to help me a little bit.
Yeah, that's great.
And she's probably like, this doesn't feel like work. This isn't work. For some people it is. So next question, is there anything, Ellen, that you are anxious about?
Yeah, I think I'm rolling out some big things in my business and making some changes. And there's always some degree of, I think, tension there, because you want things to go smoothly and you want them to go the way that, you envision a certain direction. And, so, yeah, I think just wanting everything to go well and just to make sure I get everything in place before we launch it.
Can I ask specifically, what's one thing that you're wanting to launch, but you're not really sure? It sounds like you're not really sure maybe how it's going to go, or?
No, it's just there's a lot of things to do, and this is a little bit different from things I've done before, and the way that I'm launching it. And so I think specifically just some of the pieces that need to be in place are different for this launch than other ones. So
What's different this time?
Normally I would do, let's say, a marketing rollout. So I would prepare certain materials and, like you would say, about a product or service. Mm-hmm. So there's stuff that talks about it and how it benefits, whoever it's being sold to, et cetera. And so I'm doing some speaking. And so it's a little bit different. It's different, the medium is different, and what I'm going to be talking about is different. And so it's just kind of a different beast.
Yeah. Speaking at conferences, or speaking okay.
Yes, and that's part of what I need to figure out, is exactly where I'm going to be speaking. And, I know the groups I want to speak to, but just figuring out what, I'm hoping to do some in universities and some in, seminars, possibly, I can't think of the word, but in conferences, there's the different tracks, there's the side tracks.
Yep.
And so I'd like to possibly speak at some of those at tech conferences and things like that.
Nice.
Just kind of sorting all that out, but I don't really know what all the answers are. So, that always kind of makes me think about, just hopeful that I'll figure it out and it'll all roll out smoothly. There's
a friend of mine who, when he launched his business, that was his main marketing thing, was speaking at conferences. And he's like, you should do it. So I sat down, and, it's just the blank page, and you're just what do I talk about? It's I know a bunch of things, but how do I make sure that it's the thing that somebody else actually cares about and could benefit from?
Right, and that's the tricky part, is that part, and then also whoever's organizing whatever the conference or whatever is, what do they think is important, and do they think that what you are pitching as the thing you're going to talk about, do they think it's something that the people attending will be interested in?
Right, because they want to boost their conference. So, that's how you get into this. Everybody has to talk about AI thing, right? So,
yes.
If AI is not in your talk, then... So if you talk about authentic marketing without AI, I bet nobody's going to pitch that at the conference.
Exactly.
Just out of curiosity, what's like the main conference you're thinking about targeting?
I'm not sure yet. There's a number of tech conferences, and I don't have the names off the top of my head. I have, a list of ones I've been looking at, but I'm just getting started looking into that.
Yeah, let me know afterwards, because I'm also trying to find good places to go. And I don't know, I do what I can to stay local. Like, I enjoy traveling, I like traveling, but with the family, traveling is kind of hard. So I'm always looking for things in Dallas, where we're at. Dallas is not as known for its tech scene as Austin. Austin's only a drive away, so that's still a good place to go. But yeah, let me know if you find anything, especially if it's local, because I think that those events are good to share. I guess, and I'll say this too, I've been to a lot of events in the last couple of months, a lot of networking events, and it seems like 80% of them are not the right fit, and there's only 20% that are, that are actually higher quality people that have been there for a while, like the place you and I met at the IoT networking event. So it just seems hard to find the right places. So if you end up with any really good suggestions, I'd love to share those out with the audience.
Yeah, I agree. So you have to look at the conference and look at what the content is and say, does this line up with what I'm trying to do? And that, it's kind of time consuming to do.
Yeah, it is. Okay, last introductory question. What are you hopeful about?
I'm really hopeful about, I guess, just this year and some of the things that I'm doing in my business I'm really excited about.
Yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast is your unique story. And you've been technically doing your own business, your own consulting thing for like 20 years or something.
Long time.
How long is it now?
A long time. I technically launched my business in 2003.
2003, technically you launched. I think a lot of folks would have given up along the way. We'll get into your story a little bit, but 2003, so about 20 years, 21 years late, 22, man, it's 2025 already. So even back then, I don't know if you can remember that far back, but what made you want to start your own company?
Well, I've actually thought about it since I was probably about 18 years old. Growing up, my mom stayed at home. She was an amazing mom and really my rock. As I got older and started thinking about, adult stuff like having a family, I really wanted to be able to do the same thing, but I did want to work. And, she wanted to do some work on the side as she was at home, but back then the opportunities were, you could do Tupperware or you could sell Mary Kay or something, there were just different opportunities, not like professional office type opportunities as much, and unless you, left and went to work somewhere. So I wanted to be in the home. As I started my career, I worked at Nortel for 13 years. I really started thinking about what skills I could use to do that someday. So, like marketing strategy, research, copywriting. So I started in marketing, and then I got a master's, a technical degree, Master of Science in Telecom, so I could become a product manager at Nortel. And so that kind of set the stage. So I had that combination of the technical and marketing. And then at one point at Nortel, the .com crash hit, and there was downsizing that happened. And a guy in my group was on the list to be downsized, and he was a sole breadwinner for his family, and I was not. And by that time I had 2 kids, and I just thought, this might be a good time to go and try to, stay at home and start my business. And so I just asked if they would put me on the list, and so I got a great severance package, and I switched with him basically. So it was a win-win.
Okay, so he was on the list, you were not.
Right.
He was a sole breadwinner, you were not, so you basically went to them and said, hey, he can have my seat, I'll go ahead and take the layoff.
Right.
You got the severance package,
right,
and then we're able to have some extra time to start investing in what your business would look like.
Right, and so I, had worked there for 13 years, so I got a great package, and it really worked out well. So, but then, twists and turns happened, and I didn't actually start it right away, even though within 2 years I created the company and did my DBA and all that stuff. But I didn't start the company right away. So.
Sure. Very cool. So here in Texas, Nortel's kind of a big name, especially in the Dallas area. There's a little town north of Dallas called Richardson, which somebody told me the other day. They're like, that's, Telecom Central is in Richardson. Coming from Seattle, Washington, I had no idea telecom was so big out here. So maybe just give us a brief, who is Nortel? What's the main thing they did? And maybe, you talk about doing marketing for them. What did that look like?
So a Canadian company, and one of the largest telecom infrastructure manufacturers. And so I worked for the wireless division. So we manufactured equipment for all the wireless carriers. And so I started out in marketing, and I was actually only the second person in wireless, which grew to thousands of people. I don't know. So I was early on, we were part of another division, but I started out doing product marketing and just creating marketing plans and figuring out the best way to market the products to those wireless carriers. And decided I wanted to become a product manager, but you really needed to have an engineering degree to do that. It was all engineers that did that. And so the product managers were kind of the product owners, they used to call it like a mini general manager of a product. So you oversaw everything about that product. So that seemed really to be an exciting role. So I went back and got my master's so I could switch over to that role. And that's what I did. And that's how I developed kind of that marketing part of my experience and education, and then the technical part when I was a product manager. So that kind of set the stage for the business that I have now.
I've heard this advice before. I don't know if it was ever directly stated as advice, but I think a lot of founders tend to have experiences in a lot of different parts of the world, right? So you started out in marketing, kind of went over to the technical side. People do the other way, but I think that's good for us to consider, especially if we're thinking about younger founders who are getting into things, they have aspirations. You know, you were 18 when you started thinking about doing something down the road, like understanding that one of the best things you can do is get a diverse set of experiences, I think. And I actually also love that you spent about 13 years in Nortel, because I think being able to be in a company that long and do various kinds of jobs within that company seems to be a good way to kind of round out your own experience and learn a lot of different things that you're going to need when the time comes to do your own venture, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I remember they used to present the financials, the company financials. And when I first got to the company, I didn't know anything about that. And so it was just a way of having exposure to that and a lot of other things, as you said. So it was a really great experience. I really loved working there.
Man, okay, so another thing I want to ask you is, you said you were like one of the first two people to do some of that marketing stuff for the wireless, I don't know what they call it, a department? Division, wireless division. And again, this was many years ago. So just broadly speaking, like, what has changed in marketing, you know, with the advent of all the new technology and AI? And that was, because that was business to business marketing you were doing?
Yes.
What's different now? And like, what should people be focused on now that might be different or might be the same as it was when you were doing it 15 years ago?
Everything's changed. So, and that created a huge challenge for me because, you know, I was educated and started my career in the world of print, right? Everything was print marketing. You printed a lot of brochures and you just printed everything. And then, of course, websites came along, but that was all new. And so we were basically writing copy for websites in a similar way to what you would do for a brochure. As you know, everything just progressed and changed where everything was digital. And then there was search, and it was just completely different. Social media and all the ways of marketing were just done differently. The principles are the same. You know, you still need to have a strategy. You still need to understand how you're positioning yourself in the market. How are you different from your competition? And, you know, what are your customers' pain points, and how is what you're offering, how is that a solution to what they're struggling with? So all those things are the same, but how you go about it, the media is all different. So, you know, video now is much more of I would call it everyday thing in marketing, whereas before it was, you know, you hired a production company to come in and it was really expensive and you had to prepare for months to write scripts and everything. Everything was scripted, and so it was completely different. And that was a real challenge later on when I went to start my business, because everything had shifted and changed and all the skills were different. And so not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah. Is that like when you started your own business and saw that some of those skills had changed? I mean, did you like go back to school to learn anything? Was it all just like Googling and, you know, figuring it out as you go?
Yeah, it was mostly training myself through videos and things like that, because when at the time I actually started my business, and I would say had more time to put into it, I was a single parent and didn't have, you know, very low income at the time, and so I didn't have the money to invest in going and training myself on all these new marketing ways of doing things. So yeah, I had to kind of learn on my own.
What do you think about, I see a lot of advice like on LinkedIn. Oh, you have to post on LinkedIn every single day and then you will get whatever, 50,000 followers. What do you think about advice like that?
I think it really depends on what you're selling, who you're selling to, and where they congregate. So if you're selling to people who are on LinkedIn frequently, then it is a good strategy. And there's lots of different ways you can go about getting attention on LinkedIn. You know, there's newsletters, and like you said, there's just posting. And I think what you're posting is really important because it needs to be something that's interesting and helpful to your target market, you know, not just promotional, what I call look at me posts that are here's my stuff and here's why you should buy it, that kind of stuff.
I appreciate what you're saying because part of what I'm hearing is the fundamentals haven't changed, right? The fundamentals of having clarity on, like you said, like what is your marketing strategy? What is your position? What value do you have? Like that seems like deep thought work that always has to happen regardless of. Today it's used to be Twitter, then it was TikTok, you know, it's LinkedIn for B2B, whatever. But all that stuff is secondary to kind of like the core, what you're trying to do, who you can serve, really understanding that, it seems like.
Right, and I think everything you do should be based on that. So you should know who you're trying to sell to, what their needs are, and then the strategy should be based around that. So whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's other social platforms or whether it's just direct selling because you see all, you know, let's say you have a very small customer base, there's only, 5 companies or something, and you see them every month at a conference or something like that, then, that may be the best route for you to go to sell to those people. So I don't think there's this works for everyone. I think it should all be based on what you're trying to do, who you're trying to sell to, and it's very similar to, in that way, to before everything changed with marketing and went digital. You still have to say, in the old days, it would be, what magazines are they reading? And so what magazines should I advertise in? What magazines should I try to submit articles so they'll read it and say, these guys are really credible. They understand my problems. I want to call them. That was the print version of what people should be doing on social media, which is, how do I build credibility? And that's, like you said, a lot of people say you should post every day, but what you post is important also. And that's something that I think there's a lot of misconception about, because all posts are not created equal. Yes, posting does get people to see you, and so the awareness can be there, but if you're just posting stuff that's all stuff your customers don't really care about, it doesn't involve them, maybe it's just all about your company or what you're doing, then people will tune it out.
That makes a lot of sense. I think even I've sought help on my business from time to time, and one of the things that I'd looked at was like a content manager, one of these people, right? Social media manager. And when I started asking them, like, well, how do you, like, what is it that you really do? And one of them gave me the answer of like, well, hey, we subscribe to all these newsletters. We get them all to your inbox. We basically regurgitate them and repost similar content, from your perspective, quote unquote, on the platform. But to your point, there wasn't any conversation around like, well, who are you trying to serve? What's your message? Is this even relevant, right? I mean, assumedly they're going to sign me up for newsletters that would be relevant, but then I'm also like, well, if I'm receiving content I'm not actually reading, and then if I go and somebody else posts content that I'm not actually reading, I'm not becoming any more of an expert or like understanding that industry that I'm theoretically trying to serve. So I don't know, I was very turned off by that answer. I don't know if you have an opinion about that sort of content marketing strategy.
I mean, you want to have a variety. So you don't, as I said, you don't want it all to be look at me kind of post about your company and your services. But I think a good strategy is to think about what your customers want to know. What are they struggling with? What are they worried about? What do they have questions about, or are they confused about? What do they need help with? And so in their business, if you think about, the customer has this problem over here and they're worried about, how do I solve it? What are the options? What's the analysis of those options? So how do I know how to choose which option? Things like that. Those are really good things to post about. And you can find those by figuring out what they're searching online and posting about those topics. That's what gets customers to say, wow, they're really helpful and credible, and they're helping me move forward on addressing whatever my issues are. And then, yes, it's good to post like stuff from newsletters, stuff that's going on in the industry. If you have an opinion about it, you see this all the time. People posting on whatever's going on in the market or, saying, giving their insight about how this might affect the customers or how this will affect prices of stuff in the supply chain. Those are important to the client as well. And if you have a perspective on it that would be helpful and add value, I think that's the key to me is, does this add value? Would this be interesting to my customer and helpful, or would it just be noise? And if it's just noise, like an excuse to post, then that's not, to me, that doesn't pass the test. So this shouldn't be posted.
Yeah, I like that. I'm hearing one of the things I hear you saying actually is like the ability to filter, right? Like filter the noise, filter what's not valuable, distill it down to what is valuable, and then have an opinion, right? Have an insight that goes along with that, particular thing that's happening in the industry or something like that. And again, that takes real work. I don't think that there's any like automated AI system that's going to get that for you, because you yourself have to think about it. You have to understand it. And AI can, I think, help identify, would my audience care about this, right?
And it can help build out the content.
And it can help copyright the content, with the, what do you call it, like the nuts and bolts of kind of like how to say something and the clarity and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, fun content, entertaining content about your company culture, oh, look at this great party we had, etc. That's good too, because it can give people behind the scenes look at things that happen in your company for recruiting purposes. And also, sometimes customers want to know, what's this company really like? Everybody puts their best foot forward, obviously, on their website and stuff like that. But sometimes posts can show, oh, here they are goofing off, and so that's a fun place to work, and they care about their people, which customers are obviously people too. And so we want to work with a supplier that cares about us like they care about their employees. And so those kind of posts are good too.
That's good. I think it's hard for some of us to, I actually don't like doing that very much, because like you said, I don't like it when it's like the me show, everybody look at me, and there's so much that cringy content out there.
There is.
But that's a really good point, I think, like when you're making it about the company, documenting an event, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, big random tangent.
Okay.
That was all a big random tangent on just marketing value. But I want to get back to your story, because you kind of mentioned those first 2 years, you created the company, but you hadn't quite started it for a couple of years. So I guess what was kind of the journey to getting maybe the first customer and kind of starting on that path?
Well, I didn't start my business right away. I was helping, there's two people I was helping with their companies, and that was kind of unexpected, but I felt like it was important. And so
you were helping them in a paid way or in a non-paid way?
In a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know there have been ups and downs in your career, and I want to get through those, but kind of like that first moment of like, first real customer, like, okay, and now I'm like on my own with this company, like things are starting to maybe go well.
Yeah, I actually got my first several customers through family and friends. And so it reached a point where I really felt like I needed to start bringing in some income. And so I just started letting people around me know, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm trying to launch. And so, if you know of any opportunities, let me know. And that turned into 2 customers that were both longtime customers.
Nice.
Yeah, that was really great. So it just goes to show sometimes when you go to networking events that you think maybe this isn't the right group or whatever, you never know what can lead to customers. And sometimes it's the people that are not in the tech space that end up referring you. So that was an important lesson.
Yeah, good point. So you got your first 2 customers through friends and family fairly quickly, and it was all smooth sailing ever since then, right? No problems.
No, definitely, absolutely smooth sailing, never a bump in the road.
What was the first major bump in the road?
I had sold something to a customer, and I realized I had forgotten to include something important that was needed as part of what they had bought.
So you sold a marketing package, but you kind of realized after the fact that there should have been another deliverable.
Yes, there was something else that was involved, and you could say it was maybe like the equivalent if you sold somebody a computer and you realize that they really are going to require support, or maybe a website, and there's going to need to be updates or something, and they're not going to do the updates, so you need to sell them, the package with the updates.
The package with like a retainer, a good retainer plan that kind of fits their needs.
And so I realized I had completely just not done that. And so I had to go back. I had to go back and talk to the customer, and it was really embarrassing. It was just one of those moments that you just say, wow, that was really a huge rookie mistake. But they always say the lessons best learned are the ones that are, the most expensive. And so that was one of them. So yeah, there was definitely some bumps in the road, and along the way there, while doing my business, I unexpectedly became a single parent, and that was the unexpected part was the most challenging because I really hadn't had a chance to build up my business. Had always set it up where I was mom first, and then I had set the business up so I could work from home, so I could be there, but I would work at night when the kids were either at school or napping and things like that. And so I really was set up to do the work that I had with clients, but I wasn't set up to do a lot of business development because it was just a time issue. So that was a huge challenge.
So it sounds like when you started it, you kind of thought, like, not to undermine it or anything, but you were kind of thinking, hey, this will be a good side hustle to, like, keep my professional development going, make money on the side, but you weren't expecting it to have to be the main thing.
Right,
it sounds
exactly.
Like. Not only did it become the main thing, but you also had 3 kids. I think you said you had 3 kids, so you had kids to take care of at the same time, plus doing the main thing. You had the systems for delivery in place maybe, but not the business development side and the growth side of that. Working during nap times and evenings when the kids go to bed, that's exhausting.
It was.
What was the worst moment in that journey?
There was a period of time that was just so stressful that I honestly, I'm a person of faith, and if I wasn't, I don't know how I would have gotten through it because my hair was falling out, I was not sleeping, which, as you can imagine, then trying to do a business and parent 3 kids by yourself, like that, that's not good on very little sleep. And I was, sometimes I would fall asleep at stoplights and the kids would be like, Mom, yeah, it was bad. And I really just didn't know where, the next check was coming from. I had some of the clients I had developed into a place where it was ongoing work. But I remember that I was having to have snacks and everything for my kids to take to school. I was baking granola bars and stuff at night, and I was just so exhausted. It was so exhausting.
You were baking granola bars at night to, like, save money?
Right, because I didn't have the money to go buy, if you think about, I would send my kids to school at lunch and, they need to have a variety of things to eat. And I didn't have enough to buy all the snacks and things that I need to send them with. So I was, baking granola bars. That was a moment that stands out because I was baking granola bars at night to be able for them to have them to take to school. My oldest daughter was telling me that recently that she didn't remember that's why I was making the granola bars. So she was telling me that you were such a great mom and you were making these granola bars and stuff, homemade granola bars. And I was like, well, I don't want to fall off this pedestal here, but I was making the granola bars because I didn't have money to go buy them at the store. So yeah, that was definitely a stressful period.
Man, that hits me. That's just like, seeing the work that my own wife goes through. And you're right, like, there's so many. I also think that speaks to your character, that the kids, they remember that as like a fond memory. So whatever you were doing, as stressed as you felt, you were not projecting that onto them in a way where they felt, Mom is too busy for us, or Mom is, Mom is, what was the thing I was just thinking? Well, the money thing, because I think there's a lot of parents who have an unhealthy relationship with work or money, and then that gets projected on the kids sometimes. And for them to look back and think, she made us these homemade granola bars and it was great, instead of thinking, she was stressed about money her whole life and now I'm going to be stressed about money my whole life, right? There's like these psychological, things that get down to our kids that we don't expect a lot of times. And yeah, to me that's amazing that you were able to maintain that.
Well, I tried my best, but I do think that it's impossible to hide that you're stressed about money when you're in that situation. So I'm sure that did get passed down, and there were times I was really stressed. So I know that I did my best to minimize that, but only they could really tell you. I'm sure there are, I'm sure there are things they would tell you that were not positives about that. But I did do my best, and I really felt like my mom always, through whatever ups and downs she was facing, I felt like she was a great mom because she always tried to shield us from that. And so I tried my best, but if you can imagine, your hair's falling out and you're falling asleep at the stoplight, it's kind of hard to hide all of that from your kids.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and me and my wife joke all the time. Some comedian was like, talking about, I think he must have been talking about his kids. He's like, I know my kids are going to go to their therapist someday and be like, my dad, threw me across the road one time. And he's like, he's like, the kids are going to feel like I did these things against him. He's like, yeah, why I threw you across the road? Because there was a car coming and I was saving your life. It's like, what do you want me to do? It's just like these perspectives that no matter how hard you try, they're going to see it a certain way, and there's probably no way for you to ever convince them otherwise.
It's true. And I mean, we joke about stuff that I do that annoys them. So we have a good relationship in that they do tell me stuff that they feel like I do wrong or whatever like that. Yeah. And so there is no way to avoid it. And I joke to them like, it's just a matter of what I'm going to do wrong. It's not, am I going to do something wrong? It's just like, which thing are you going to be sitting on a therapist's couch about at some point, telling them like, and then my mom did such and such.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that was the worst moment. You said you made it through that. You said your faith was part of that.
Definitely.
What did, I guess, like how long of a period was that? When did that start to turn around for you and things got more stable?
It's hard to say, I guess, Dan, because it was so all-encompassing. I was so immersed in trying to it was really survival at that point that it's difficult to say. I didn't have a lot of time to be introspective and think about how are things going and all that. So I guess several years I got some clients that were really regular and partnerships going and things like that. So it was a gradual thing. I know I've talked to people that it's different. It's more pronounced, within, year 2 was tough and then year 3, everything turned around. For me, it was much more gradual because it was a lot slower process because I was parenting and doing the business at the same time. As I said, I didn't have the time to do the business development piece much, and so it was more like things that just came to me, and then trying to do the best I could for the clients that I had. So that made the progress more gradual over a long period of time. So I don't know, I think one day I kind of just thought to myself, wow, I'm no longer worried about, the fee that the bank takes out of my account every month for my checking account or whatever. One day I just realized like, okay, things are a little bit better. I'm feeling a little bit like I have a little bit more margin to work with. And so, that was definitely took some time to get there, but I think mostly because of the, double things I was doing.
Did you ever think about quitting?
Absolutely. It was really hard, but being a mom's my favorite job I've ever had and love that. And so there were times I thought, maybe I just need to go get a job. And I can't tell you the number of people that told me that because people were very, have an instant solution to your problems, but if they've never been there, they just didn't understand. And they said, why don't you just go get a job? And I said, well, that sounds easy, but I have to have income coming in. So in a lot of cases where people are looking for a job, they have a spouse that's working. And so the spouse is working, so whether the person got laid off and now they're looking for a job or whatever it is, they can dedicate a it's like a full-time job looking for a job. Well, I already had 2 full-time jobs, basically. And so I didn't have time to also look for a job, or let me say it a different way. I could not stop doing the work I was doing to look for a job.
Because you did have some income coming in from the work that you were doing.
Yes.
And you had commitments, you had clients that you had commitments to. Okay.
And also, I was able to be at home with my kids. So my kids didn't have bus service, and so they required carpool, and that was just based on where we were zoned. We had transferred to a different school system, and so all the people we knew, all their friends were in this school system over here, but they required carpool to school.
Yeah.
So there was also carpool. So I was thinking, okay, even if I could get a job in a week, let's say, which doesn't normally happen, Just taking the time required out of the equation, I still have to figure out how to get 3 kids in 3 different schools. So I had, different times. I would have one in elementary, one in middle school, and one in high school, which all start at different times and all get out at different times. So you have, 6 segments of carpool to drive during the day.
Yeah.
And how do you do that if you're at a job where you have to be in an office? So I thought about, there were several times I did look for jobs and I wasn't selected, so I stopped what I was doing. I had to go update my resume, and anytime you're updating a resume, if it's outdated and then you're trying to add anything important for that particular position, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Then you have to go interview, et cetera, any follow-up interviews. And so I had been away from the industry. Yes, I was working on my own company, but I'd been away from, big corporate jobs for a lot of years by that point, and so I didn't end up getting the job. So on the couple different occasions, I did stop, and it was mostly somebody contacting me saying, "Hey, we have a position open. Would you be interested?" I went, "Wow, maybe I should do that." And so I took the time and did it, and then I didn't get the position, and then I thought, there's a saying, like, you can't ride 2 horses at the same time. And I was already riding 2 horses at the same time, so I couldn't ride 3 horses at the same time. So I just decided, I really just need to go all in on my business and stop getting distracted by thinking, well, if I could just get a job, then I could increase my income quickly, because, that's kind of like saying, Dan, if you just run a marathon, then you could, whatever comes after that, and you're like, well, I haven't trained, I don't have time, when am I going to train, I'm busy. You just have to figure out all the things between. If you just walk across that pit of hot lava, then you can be on the other side. So, I just eventually stopped trying to do that.
You mentioned that a lot of people didn't understand your situation. Was there anybody that was like on your team during that period?
Definitely, for me, God is the biggest one, big important player, but my mom, my parents, actually, and I had some close friends that were just there the whole way. And, I had some friends that used to bought meat and things from a farmer, and they used to go just stock up my freezer, and other friends who just would listen and be there for, moral support, and, people that help with the kids. And so there were various people that were there through the whole thing, and just were really amazing.
Good. Okay, so I appreciate you sharing all that about kind of your journey. So, like you said, you kind of started, you said 2003, I believe. You have a long history of working in marketing, and specifically, well, actually, I'll let you just give us kind of the brief, 1 sentence, 2 sentence summary of your company, who you focus on, who you help with marketing, and that sort of thing.
Well, I work with development companies, software and hardware development companies, and also technology product companies who are struggling to get new business, and basically work with them to build an ongoing, steady flow of ideal projects.
Okay.
Through marketing, using marketing to do that, obviously.
Okay. So what's some of the biggest mistakes that you see your clients making when it comes to that?
I think definitely the biggest is not narrowing their focus enough. So there's kind of a fear that I would say probably every company has, that you need to be open to doing business with everyone. And so therefore, I'm going to say I can serve everyone. And sometimes you look at companies, and based on their size, you just don't understand how they can serve that many areas of the market. There might be a company that lists 10 industries, and those industries are huge, multi-billion-dollar industries, and the company's small, and you're thinking, how can they really serve those? And what they're really trying to do is be open to serving those. Right. But what ends up happening is, by trying to be open to too many companies, then you're not really looking like an expert to the companies you really want to serve. So that's the biggest mistake, is just not being focused enough on who you're really trying to serve.
Do you have an example of somebody who thinks they're narrow enough, but they weren't, or they're just not, and they need to go even narrower?
Do you mean like someone I've worked with, or you mean just a large company example? Or
either. If you have a personal experience, that's good, but you've seen a lot out there. And I'm just thinking tactically, because I think we hear that advice a lot, be more narrow. But I think even in my own experience, it's difficult to do that, and a lot of times you might think that you're on to something, but it's still like not good enough, like go to the next level. So how do we help people go to the next level?
Yeah, I think to do that, the whole system has to be in place. So you have to be, and this is something I see with a lot of tech companies that just really don't have a background in marketing because they were studying engineering or computer science, and that's not part of the curriculum. So of course they didn't learn how do you set up a marketing plan, how do you do it. But so in order to be narrow and get enough business, you have to have the whole marketing plan in place. So you have to be basically going out and going fishing for those specific customers. You have to know where they are. You have to be, have the materials in place that say, understand what your struggles are, and here's what I have to offer you. And so I think that's one of the reasons that it feels like such a struggle, because all of those pieces are not in place. So what a lot of companies do is maybe they just do networking, and maybe they're not doing all the other pieces. They're not doing email campaigns, or they're not posting on social media. They're not connecting with their customers in all those ways. And so I think that definitely makes it more difficult, because you're not using the full sources, all the sources of leads that you could. And getting leads is about numbers, right? You have to have enough leads, possible leads, going into the top of the funnel for whatever amount of business you really need to sustain your business to come out of the bottom of the funnel, because lots of them fall by the wayside on the way down.
Yeah.
So it's a volume thing, right? You got to have enough volume of prospects to turn into the amount of business that you're looking for.
I think that's a really good answer. I think the whole marketing system, because I think it's really easy to over-focus on like just one aspect. And actually I see a lot of companies, as I've been looking into marketing more recently, I see a lot of companies that will kind of like, they focus in on like, hey, we fixed this one step in the process, and they can do that for some lower price point, but then you kind of need the whole thing, the whole package to really get the value of that one step. Kind of depends on the rest of the steps being in place, it seems like.
It's really true. And one of the analogies I like most about marketing is that it's like a garden. To have a garden that yields what you want it to yield, you have to do the whole thing, right? Like the soil has to have all the nutrients that you need, and it has to get enough sunlight, and then you have to have a planting pattern that's good for those plants. Some plants don't work well together next to each other or whatever. So you have to have, the way you set up your rows has to be good, and you have to make sure you're treating pests and all that stuff, and water it every day. It's not like you can't go out to the garden and just take a huge tub of water and dump it all over the flowers and say, that's what you get for this month. You've got
My kids do it.
Right. But you got to help them thrive. And that's like marketing. You have to there's a lot of things you need to do on an ongoing basis. It's a system.
And is there anything particularly unique about the times in which we live in right now? Again, you've got AI, you've got all these things going on. Like, let's think about B2B marketing, because I know that's kind of your specialty, I think. What should companies really be paying attention to in how marketing works today? I mean, we talked about the fundamentals, they have to be in place, but then when it comes to, you mentioned email campaigns, we've talked about LinkedIn, like what's the main thing we should be paying attention to as business owners and founders?
Well, one thing that is overlooked by a lot of people is making sure that you've claimed your Google business profile and optimized that. That's something that a lot of companies don't do at all. And especially with the way AI has impacted search, and that's changing, and we're not exactly sure where all that's going to come out. But being able to do local searches, so if someone's searching for what you do here locally and they say, I need a software development consultancy near me, you want to pop up in those 3 companies that show up, that are close to you. Doing that via Google Business Profile is really a really important thing to do right now. And then also, as we talked about before, making sure you're posting things that are valuable on LinkedIn, if that's where your target customers spend time. And email campaigns are always good. Email just has such a high return on investment. If you start building a list of people who want to hear from you, want to get the content that you're sending them, that's just so valuable, such a good source of business.
You mentioned people Googling for something like software consultancy near me. Do you find that near me search terms, is that, what am I trying to say? We live in this post-COVID world. I guess I'm thinking about the trends of like, people have gone offshore, there's maybe a little wave of people coming back to onshore. I don't know if that's just the current, who's in office right now or something, but do you find that the whole like near me, like the locality stuff is becoming more important, less important? Like where are we with that versus the virtual world of, offshore developers and everything?
I'm not sure as far as the offshore versus local from a software development standpoint, but from local searches, that's continued to grow just year over year. That's continued to grow, and I think it's because, and it's also evolved. So it started out being people were just searching software development company, and then it became, I can search for something and have location added, so software development near me, and now it's become things like software development near me, open now. It's, I want to, and sure. I'm not saying that software development is something where someone would just drive right up into your business right now, but like they would a restaurant or something, but it's just evolving.
And there's kind of just this expectation of how they do Google searches or how the AI bots do the searches.
Right, and as it gets more intelligent and it can deliver results that understand as you start to add things onto your search like that, I would just expect that will continue to grow. So I definitely think it's an important place to be.
I mean, I don't know enough to make a bet yet, but I want that to be the world that we live in. And I think that with all the new AI tools and everything's getting easier. Like we can do a podcast now with, a little phone and a lapel, for like a couple $100, you can do things that used to cost thousands of dollars, to your point earlier about production. And I think there's going to be a lot more creators on the market. And I think that the geolocale or the geography filtering, I hope is one way that things continue to improve, because I think that it's like, if the market gets flooded with people who can legitimately do the same skill, it's like, how do we still have that abundance mindset where there's room for all of us in the market? And I feel like this, more like in-person local filtering would maybe help with that. So I don't know if that will be the world, but it seems to me like a good world to start to live into, just more connected with your local community and everything.
Yeah, and I guess regardless of the location, people always buy from people, when we've talked about this, that they know, like, and trust. And so whether it's somebody searching for you locally or not, people want to build a relationship and understand, try to decide whether or not they trust you, right? Yeah. And so and if they do, then they're open to doing business with you. And so building a relationship, in my opinion, will always be a part of business. And AI is not about building a relationship, and so there's always that part of it that will be involved, the human element to it. And so the reason I said whether it's local or not is, there are people who do podcasts that are very popular that are not local, but you like what they're saying, and what they're saying is valuable and gives you insight or entertains you, whatever it does. And so, they're building a relationship with you, even though it's not necessarily two-way if you're just listening, but it's still a relationship.
Right. Here's the bet I am going to make. So it seems to me, in all my years of living, which is not very many, there's always kind of like the majority and the minority, right? So like if you think about Facebook, the majority of people went to Facebook, they like Facebook, they use Facebook, and then you kind of have this strong minority that's like anti-Facebook, it's not real relationships, etc. And I think that at the very least, the whole like near me filter, there will be a strong minority of people who make their decisions based on that, if that makes sense. So I think that there's always going to be kind of a strong market or a strong niche, if you will, around, doing things like this, because I haven't done this. I haven't done my Google business profile, because I'm like, well, I'm a software, I'm a virtual world. I lived in Texas and worked for Silicon Valley, for Seattle, Washington, and had a client in Florida. So it's like I actually didn't have any clients in Dallas for the first 2 years of my business. So to me, that wasn't a priority, but I think that there are people, I think there's always going to be a strong niche of people who that's how they know, like, and trust somebody, is if they're in the same town as me. So I think that that's still going to be, and you didn't say this, but I thought it's really low cost to do something like this. So it's really there's no reason not to do it.
Right, and I know what you're saying, because if you've lived in a world where you can just work with people in different cities, and when I was at Nortel, I worked all the time with people in Canada, people in Miami, people throughout the world. And so I felt like you did. I feel like you do in that I can work with people anywhere. And so it's easy to forget that. But isn't it great to work with someone local? We can just meet right here and say, hey, let's have a cup of coffee and talk about whatever your problem is that you'd like to discuss with me and see if I can help. So, and some people do prefer not just local, but, companies that are American companies. Yep. Others, like you said, want to support the local community or just for convenience. They're saying, I'd really like to be able to meet with somebody in person because it's a little bit easier to learn about somebody in person and a little more casual than when you get on a conference. You can chit chat as you're getting your coffee and ask questions about their family or their personal background, and it gives you clues to that person. Yeah,
so true. So true. Okay, so then kind of some final question here, because I want to get a little bit more into kind of what you do, because we talk about this big system, right, of things that you could do, the Google profile, Google business profile, email campaign, all this stuff. Tell us a little bit more about where your focus is from that marketing perspective, what kind of services you provide.
So a big thing that I do is try to help companies understand and identify and be able to communicate how they're different. Everyone usually has competitors, so how are they different, and is there a place in the market where they're uniquely qualified to do projects, et cetera, where there's less competition because it's very specific to what they do. So I work with companies to do that piece of it, and then also developing their value proposition, and then trying to figure out, okay, based on your target customers, where are the best places to go, what are the best channels to use, and what are the best types of media. Sometimes people have a product that has a great demo, like you see the demo and you just want it. It's great to use video for that because it immediately communicates to people. It creates demand. So I try to just help them come up with a marketing plan to figure out what are the best channels, and then what's the best combination of media to communicate what they need to communicate. And so a lot of times that ends up being developing their Google business profile, their email campaigns, just looking at their website and making sure it's optimized to get the customer to do whatever it is you want them to do. If you want them to fill out a form so you can contact them, or you want them to call you or send you an email or whatever, to try to encourage them to do what it is you want them to do. And then, of course, social media, just depending on what platform their customers are using, trying to figure out the best strategy for communicating via social media, which can take a lot of time. So especially for small companies, that can seem just daunting. How do I figure out content and post it on social media and have it help me and not just be noise?
Yeah, excellent. I think there's a lot of, and I think to your point earlier, even in your own journey, just a lot of things that you sort of know the outcome you want, but you don't know how to get there. You can teach yourself with hours and hours of YouTube courses and stuff, or you can sort of fast track that by finding a good marketing person who knows what they're doing. And even if you end up doing the work in the end, I think part of what I hear you saying is you help them figure out the strategy part, that deep thought work part, which is actually the hard part. Right. And once you understand all that, the tactical execution part is quite a bit easier. Makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and there's a lot of mixed opinions out there about what you should or shouldn't do in marketing these days. So I think it can be very confusing to figure out so even if you said, I'm going to do the marketing stuff myself, where do I spend my time? Because, this person has videos that say I should do this, and this person over here has videos that say I should do that. It can be confusing.
Just real quick, is there a piece of popular marketing advice that you hear that you very much disagree with, at least for your industry, for what you typically help people with?
One of them is that, marketing is just completely different these days, and it's really, the execution is different, but the foundational principles and the fact that you need a strategy and figure out how you're different is not different. So that's just something I see sometimes that I don't agree with. And then also agree that posting makes you visible and that builds awareness. But I think and I'm not saying that the folks that you mentioned that said they do newsletters and stuff, this is not a specific comment about them. I want to make that clear.
Sure.
But just in general, that I think there's a lot of
trash.
there's a lot of stuff that's posted that I think just is not really helping companies, and they're paying money, but it's not necessarily moving them in the direction that they want to go.
You're a much nicer person than I am. Very cool. So in the show notes, we will link your LinkedIn profile, your website. I think we already have. Where else can people find you? And I guess who specifically are you looking to connect with?
Owners, CEOs, leadership of development companies and technology product companies.
Anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so.
Is there anything that you were hoping to talk about that we didn't cover?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you're pretty thorough and very interesting conversation.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.